Hey everyone, today we are starting to look at international trade, and first we're going to look at the benefits of international trade. What are they? Firstly, we get greater choice. So, consumers, I say we, I mean consumers, we get greater choice. So, variety of resources. So, for instance, in Australia, we don't really have things like coffee beans. So, by trading, we get access to those things, and that means we've got more choice in what we consume. And theory says that makes us happier people. We also get culture. So people are into different things. We've got a wide variety of choice. If you're not into sort of Australian culture sort of things like footy, you've got French culture, French film like Amelie, K-pop, right? You got plenty of options by having that trade with the rest of the world. And we also tap into the expertise of other countries. So we get these goods that we love, like AirPods. Almost everyone's got them these days. We rely on other countries to produce things like that, and then we can enjoy them. So we wouldn't get that if it weren't for trade. Okay, low prices. Love low prices. How do we get low prices? We get that increased competition. So local firms, if we are importing things, we're allowing trade from overseas, we're importing things, local firms have to be more competitive to survive. They've got to lower their prices, lower their costs of production so that they can still make profit. They've got to compete more heavily, lower their prices, otherwise they won't survive. So, example of cars here. We've got a Holden made in Australia, and we've got a Citroen. I never know how to say that word. That's a French car brand, I'm pretty sure. So we get Holden started to get a lot of competition in the 90s, 2000s, and turned out they just weren't as efficient at making cars as other countries in the world, and that's why Holden stopped producing cars in Australia. That it wasn't viable here. But what happened? We got lower prices because we weren't just relying on expensive Australian produced cars. Sometimes other countries can just be more efficient in the production of certain goods. An example of that is clothing. Australia, with our high wages, we're not great at making clothing. We make good clothing, but we don't make cheap clothing. Other countries are much more efficient at it. Access to resources for production. Not every country has all the natural resources that they want, right? So a big one, oil. That's why countries trade. Some countries don't have oil. They need to trade. If they didn't trade, actually, they might be starting wars to get those resources. All right. Another benefit, we get access to larger markets. So, for example, if an Australian company starts selling not just to Australian consumers, of which there's only 20 odd million, but they sell to the world and there's billions of consumers, you have a larger market, you can make economies of scale. So you produce on a much larger scale, you are able to produce each unit more cheaply, right? So you lower the average cost of production when you produce on a large scale. We learnt that in microeconomics a while ago. So, like I said, what economies of scale are, you might need a reminder when the average cost for firms decrease as the firm increases its output. They get more efficient at it because they're doing so much more of it. Okay. Efficiency. So costs, will cut costs. It's cheaper to buy things from overseas often. So we get to buy from the most efficient producers of that good. So we can cut costs of our own production in that way. We buy the materials from the cheapest provider, the most efficient provider. And we get a lot of spread of ideas and technology. So, for example, spread of technology is not too hard to imagine. One company starts using this technology. Other companies are wanting to compete. They'll work out what are they doing that they can do this so quickly and cheaply, and they'll use that technology as well. Also, the ideas. So the production line, right? Not everyone thought of that straight away themselves. It didn't spring up organically in factories all over the world. That happened through trade. Right? People trade with each other, that those ideas spread around the world, and those ideas are efficient ideas. They make things cheaper, so that's a benefit that we all get. Specialization. Trade can lead to countries specializing in a good due to their resources and expertise, and they get better and better at it. And they can produce. It makes more sense for them to specialize in the production of one thing, and then sell that, and then use the money they get from it to buy something that another country specializes in. Right? So Australia's good at producing wine. We produce and sell a lot of wine, and then we might buy cheese from somewhere else who are really good at making cheese. And that's better than trying to do both ourselves. Right? What actually happens is that a country can consume more than they could produce themselves. Right? They're so good at making one thing that they use all that money that they make from selling it to buy what another country is really good at making. So they can actually consume beyond their production possibilities curve in that impossible region. They can't produce out here, but they can consume out here if countries are specializing. Okay, we also get improved international relations. So here we've got the leaders of China and the US, of course. Not anymore shortly, not anymore the leader of the US. But if countries trade with each other, they sort of rely on each other. They become interdependent. So they are less likely to get involved in a conflict. And many suggest that this is one reason why Europe, this is European Union countries here. Yes, European Union countries here. They suggest that because they trade so much with each other, because they're in that economic union, that's one of the reasons they are less likely to go to war with each other. And we haven't had a major, Western European conflict since World War II. Okay, same slide again. Nice. Okay, this is our international trade diagram. It's a little bit different. It looks like a regular demand and supply diagram that you saw in microeconomics, but it is different. So I want you to draw this nice and big because we're going to make some annotations to it. So think a third of a page, half a page, all right? So let's look at, we can see some of these labels are different. Let's look at what they mean. So domestic supply, how much domestic producers are willing and able to produce at different prices, okay? Sort of what we already know. And same here, how much domestic consumers are willing and able to buy at different prices. And if there was no trade, so if the country is only trading within itself, there's no trade with other countries, this is the equilibrium price of the product. So where demand equals supply, that determines the price, as we know. That's the price that would occur. Now this bit is different. This is the world supply curve. So this, we label it SW, supply world, compared to supply domestic. This represents all other producers in the world, and it is flat, so it is perfectly elastic, and that's due to the world's ability to respond to demand. So no matter how much demand there is in the world, because the world is so vast, what we assume is that the world can always respond to that demand without increasing price, right? Because the supply is so vast, there's not that scarcity that draws the price up. This is the world price. So this is the price that domestic consumers pay because with international trade, they're going to buy from the world's cheapest suppliers, the most efficient suppliers. So this is the price that consumers actually pay when we trade with the entire world. Okay. This is the quantity supplied domestically if we're trading with the world, right? So domestic suppliers, they're willing and able to sell for this low price, but they're only going to sell a small quantity at that low price. And again, low price, below the world price, they'll sell this much. They'll own at that world price, which is the price that domestic consumers are going to pay. Domestic producers can only compete so much, right? They can only supply this much, Q1, which is quantity supplied at the world price. But look, the price is low. It's lower than what the price would be without trade. So what does that do to domestic demand? That makes domestic demand greater, right? There's an expansion in demand, right? Lower price, more demand. That is the law of demand. So domestic consumers demand Q2, right? They demand more at a lower price. We know that. So there's a difference here. There's a shortage, right? At this world price, domestic producers only produce Q1. Domestic consumers want Q2. So I don't like where that ends up. That should be here. Q1 to Q2 is the level of imports. So domestic suppliers will produce up to Q1. Domestic consumers are demanding Q2. So that shortage is made up with imports, right? That's how the shortage will be cleared. Okay, it's a sort of a tricky diagram. We will go through this diagram plenty in class, so we'll get our heads around it pretty easily. Okay, thank you.